This is the Good Neighbor Podcast, the place where local businesses and neighbors come together. Here's your host, Regina Lee.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Good Neighbor Podcast. Today, I am pleased to introduce you to Aaron Pendley. He is with Heritage Funeral and Cremation Services. And Aaron, your role is the Advanced Planning Director. So first of all, welcome, and then we'll get into what you do specifically. But welcome, how are you?
I'm great. Hope you're doing well.
Very much so. And, you know, talking about this kind of thing is doesn't have to be a negative thing. You know, in chatting with you prior, I think it's exciting when you can think about kind of pre-planning your service and kind of relieving that burden to the family. But let's start first with who is the Heritage Funeral and Cremation Services in the Charlotte metro area?
Heritage Funeral Cremation Service was started in 1998, and we have Forest Lawn East Cemetery attached to it, and we have 3 locations, one in Ballantyne and one in Weddington, Matthews area, and then one in Indian Trail. And of course, I work all 3 of those locations, but it gives our folks from different communities a central location to where they are. And so many times I have folks call and say, well, I live at so-and-so, and I believe your Indian Trail location would be great. And then we get to talking, and Indian Trail doesn't really fit what they're talking about. And so we switch to Ballantyne. So it doesn't matter where I meet folks. What matters is where the actual contract is written for pre-need.
Gotcha. Well, I know when you and I were chatting, a statistic that I think is important to share, that 85% of the time, families wait until the person is gone before they reach out to plan the funeral, and just so many emotions and things are flying. But what is it you wish people knew about planning for a funeral in advance?
I wish people knew the fact that it's very easy to set up a prearranged funeral, pay for it ahead of time. We have payment options that work for almost everyone. And so the thing that I wish most people knew was that the burden that they're putting on their family once they're gone, because you're having to go in as a family, already have lost your loved one. You're already emotionally in an emotional place, and you've got to make a multi-$1,000, as in some cases, a multi-$1,000 decision within about an hour. And it's not fair to the family. This is my opinion. It's not fair to the family, but it's also a huge burden that could have been relieved if they had made prior arrangements. And there's a difference when we meet with families who have made no arrangements ahead of time. We have to ask a lot of questions. We have to gather a lot of information. And then we have to know what kind of service that they're interested in, whether it be cremation or traditional burial. You know, do you have cemetery property? And the list goes on and on. I have a PowerPoint that I use for sometimes when I meet with folks. And on it, there's a list of 100 to 175 items that if we don't take care of it as a funeral home, that you as a family or a next of kin are responsible for taking care of. If you come to a funeral home, we take care of all that for you. So it would be a huge asset to a family to go ahead and plan everything out. Go ahead and have that conversation. Some funeral homes call it the conversation of a lifetime, because that's what you're doing. You're talking about your life. 9 times out of 9, when I sit down with a couple or with someone, the first thing that they talk about is, I don't really want to talk about this. I don't want to be here. And I have to turn that around for them. and show them how much help that they're bringing to their family.
Yeah, it's emotional stuff. And I was thinking about my own personal journey. Thank goodness I haven't lost that many. But if you think about your grandparents and the little town they're from, there's one funeral home. So, when you're living in a big city like Charlotte, and let's say, you do want to think about this and plan ahead, what is that conversation, those phone calls? How does a consumer or a person that wants to do that talk to us about the process and how to find you and what are we looking for?
Well, what you should be looking for in a funeral home is an actual funeral home, an establishment, and an established funeral home that is governed by the North Carolina Board of Funeral Service, because you're going to be protected as a consumer, but you're also going to be protected as a funeral home. Especially on the pre-need side, you're protected because any contract that we enter with you is protected, so that if we ever go out of business, the North Carolina Board of Funeral Service comes in and moves those pre-needs to another reputable firm. If you're doing an insurance funded pre-need, then that insurance company, if they ever go out of business, and of course, who's ever heard of many insurance companies ever going out of business? They're the ones who make the big money. But if they go out of business, you're protected there because the North Carolina Board of Funeral Service has a recovery fund, and you can make a claim for the amount of money that you have lost from that company going out of business, and get it back from that recovery fund. So you're protected as a funeral home as well as a consumer. And there are different entities out there like the Neptune Society. That's something similar to a cremation society, where you can go and get a cremation for a very cheap price. But that's not the biggest concern. The biggest concern is, what are they going to do for your family dealing with you after your loved one has passed? Because most of the time you pay them money, they do the cremation, you get the cremains back, and that's the end of it. You have to make sure the death certificate gets filed. You have to make sure all these different things happen. But if you deal with a funeral home, then we're going to take care of all that for you. The last call that you have to make is to a funeral home, because we take care of the rest. And that's what sets us apart. The other thing that sets Heritage apart from our competitors, and I'm not going to speak bad about any competitors, I'm just talking generally. What sets us apart is our service to the families. You're going to get unrivaled and unmatched service to the family, because that's why we exist, is to take care of your family.
So give us an example, when you think, without talking about the others, what you do to set yourselves apart in that process.
So when you make a call to Heritage and tell us that your loved one has passed away, whether you have a pre-need with us or not, or a prearranged funeral or not, we're going to set up a time for your family to come in, to sit down with a funeral director, a licensed funeral director, and we're going to ask you those questions, unless you've got a prearranged funeral with us and we know those answers to those questions ahead of time. But we're going to ask you those questions. We're going to walk you through the process. And I think one misconception that a lot of people, because of stories on the internet, different news reports that have been filed and things of that nature, we can always focus on the bad in any industry. And if you only focus on that, you're never going to see the good things in an industry. And in the funeral industry, we've been beaten and battered through the years. And the one thing that you're going to get, especially from Heritage, we're not going to come in and say, well, wouldn't you like to have a service with a casket present? And you say no, because I want to be cremated. But you can have a casket present, and we're trying to get you to purchase the more expensive package or items. We're not going to do that. We're going to come in and say, so what does your service look like? Tell me about your service. And 9 times out of 10, folks are going to say, I just want to be cremated. And then I'll ask, would you consider having a memorial service or anything? No, I really don't need that. I just want the cremation. Okay, that's fine. And I go walk them through the process. Traditional burial, about the same way. We need to know if you've got cemetery property already, so that we know what cemetery we're going to be burying you in. And then from there, just asking the normal questions that we always ask. But one thing about cremation, it's heavily regulated in North Carolina, and there's a lot of paperwork that goes into it, and a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Checks and balances in the process. There's a lot of things that have to happen before we can cremate. If those things don't happen, we're not going to cremate until they happen. Those are laws that are put into place that we have to follow. So it's heavily legislated as well as regulated. And traditional burial is not that way. And the reason for that is because that cremation is so final. When you think about it, it's so final. Traditional burial, we can always go and disinter the body and do anything that we need to do. But with a cremation, once that cremation's done, that's it. That's it.
So you just made me think of something. With us being right on the North and South Carolina border, can we as people, like if we live in South Carolina right over the line, get cremated and buried and use a North Carolina service?
Yes, ma'am, you sure can.
Okay.
Like for me with the prearranged funerals and pre-need, I can't go to South Carolina and sit in your living room and write your pre-need there. But you can come to North Carolina and do that. If I were licensed in South Carolina, I could do that. And we do have some funeral directors who are licensed in South Carolina. But for the most part, especially on the pre-planning side, I would need you to come to me. And there are other ways to get around that, like maybe I don't meet you face-to-face and in person, or maybe I do. But the actual contract is signed, and I write the contract through, man, my mind just went blank. DocuSign.
That's okay. Yes, yes.
DocuSign.
So with the typical or most popular advanced planning, to what level of detail are people doing this? I mean, obviously the cost, and then I guess it's burial versus cremation, but then taking it a step further, what do most people do, or what do you recommend?
I recommend that people do what is going to help them sleep at night. And I know that sounds odd, but I pose that question to many, many people, whether it be traditional burial or cremation, either one. And it comes to the point of, if you're going to take the time to pre-plan your funeral, your wishes, that's ensuring that your wishes and your service is going to be done the way you want it to be done. And so what's going to help you after you do all this and you go home and you start thinking about it and you think, oh, I've made a huge mistake. Well, we don't want that to happen. We want you to choose what is going to be best for your family, but also what is going to help you to get that peaceful rest. Because at the end of the day, I have a lot of people that say, I can't believe that I'm finally done with this. I can't believe that I finally finished it. Some people, it takes them years to make the decision. Some people never make the decision. But 9 times out of 10, most people, when they get finished, they say, what a relief it is to have this done, to know that I'm paying for it or that it's already paid for. And the nice thing about all that is it's paid for at today's lower price than 10, 15, 20 years when you pass away.
That is really something to think about, the cost burden to your family. Let's say hypothetically, well, actually not, because I think this is maybe my own family situation. The loved one passes and we can't remember who she did the planning with.
Right.
Is there a system in place to do a search?
There is a system. We have a system in place that it doesn't matter who that you do the pre-planning with. I happen to be the only one that you can do it with at Heritage for us, but other funeral homes have multiple people. But we have a system in place, and most of the time, when I do a prearranged funeral and I write a pre-need, all of that information, including the paperwork that you sign, everything is put into a file. I start building a file on them the first time I ever meet them. And I build that file, and that file stays in our files until we hear that you have passed away and your family or hospital or nursing home or hospice entity calls us and reports the death to us. And if they never call us, if we never hear, then that file stays in our files from now on, because we don't know if they've passed away or not, because maybe they didn't use us, or especially if there's no money set aside, we call that unfunded files. And so a lot of people will just come in and give us the information that we need, but not put any money towards it, which I think is a huge mistake. But there's some people that they can't think any further than that.
Gotcha.
So
wow,
it's sad to see that happen,
Yeah.
but we do have ways for
What
people
was-
to pay overtime. So
That's amazing. Oh, yeah, a payment plan. How did you get into this business, Aaron?
well, I started out. I was called to preach years ago when I was 18 years old. I graduated high school and felt the Lord calling me to preach. And I did answer that call and pastored for 20 years. And I've been doing this for 25 in the funeral industry. And so I've done both things at one time. It's called bivocational. I'm not currently pastoring right now, but that's not to say in the future that I wouldn't. But that's kind of where how I came into it. After doing funerals for folks, and I would be the one that would end up at the funeral home with the family, not helping them make decisions, but to meet with them to talk about the service. And I would just sit there and listen. And how many times as a funeral director that I've sat in a room with a family trying to make arrangements, and I come to that point of, well, this is how much what you want is going to cost today. And so how are we going to pay for that? Do you have any life insurance? Traditional life insurance policies? No, we don't have any. Okay. How are you going to pay for this? And then you hear crickets. And
Wow.
that can all be took care of by advanced planning. And there's some
That
people
is
that come in, some families, and they're carrying their out of date, out of force life insurance policies that they quit paying on 20 years ago, thinking that they're going to be covered, and they're not. Because
wow.
with traditional life insurance, once you take out the policy, you're going to make a payment on it every month. You're going to have a premium to make every month until you pass away. And
Wow.
that's what sets what I do apart from that. It's still using insurance, but it's a funeral insurance. It's not traditional life insurance. It's irrevocably assigned to the funeral home. And so I'll talk about that in just a minute. But there's a limited time that you pay. It's 3, 5, or 10 years. And once you're finished paying premium payments for 3, 5, or 10 years, whichever one you choose, you're done. You're all paid, and you're getting it at today's price versus 20 years from now and it being quadruple the cost that it is today.
Well, go
Because
ahead and speak to what you wanted to share.
The other thing with it being irrevocably assigned to the funeral home, that means, let's say I'm sitting with a couple that's or a person that is in their 60s, and at some point in the future they may or may not need to have Medicaid to help pay them, to help pay for them to have nursing care, to go into a nursing home, that sort of thing. If Medicaid is involved, you can only have about $2,000 in any account, and you can't own things. they're going to make you get rid of some of those things and do what is called a Medicaid spend down, to where you spend down whatever excess money that you have down to $2,000. And that policy is irrevocably assigned that you take out through us, through a funeral home. And so it can't be counted as an asset in you qualifying for Medicaid. They'll give you, the Medicaid specialist will sit down with you and give you a list of legitimate costs that you can spend that money down for. And on about the second item on that list will be a prearranged, funded, irrevocably assigned funeral at a funeral home. They will actually tell you to go to a funeral home and take this out. So that's where the benefit in it is.
I can see that. Wow, this is very enlightening. And I'm sure, like most of us, we don't even actually know to think about this. So how do our listeners find you, Aaron, and Heritage Funeral Cremation Services?
We have 3 locations, and one number can take care of all of those locations, where someone is available to talk to you or to answer the phone for us 24/7, 365. We never take a day off. There's someone always on call to answer. And that number is 704-714-1540. And if it's late at night or after 5, you'll probably get our answering service, but whoever's on call will call you back very quickly. And you can also find us at heritagecares.com, heritagecares.com. And that's the easiest way to find us. And my mobile number is the best way to reach me if you're thinking about pre-need or a prearranged funeral. And that number is 252-286-9702, 252-286-9702.
Aaron, it's been a pleasure. Very, very enlightening and educational. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you. It was my honor and joy to be here.
Thank you for listening to the Good Neighbor Podcast. To nominate your favorite local businesses to be featured on the show, go to gnpsouthcharlotte.com. That's gnpsouthcharlotte.com, or call 980-351-5719.